Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was in Justice League. For decades, he had traveled from one corner of the known universe to the other, searching for a way back to his home planet. But after nearly 100 years of fruitless efforts, even with his legendary stubbornness, Naruto grew weary. Now, he had to let it go. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 49 Great Naruto. A large city that spread over 20,000 square miles could be seen even from space. It had a rough, circular shape and the streets and avenues had been designed in a spiderweb pattern. Four enormous towers stood at the edge of the city like faithful guardians. They were space terminals, a sort of airport but for spaceships. Tens of thousands of spaceships could be seen landing or departing from those four terminals on a daily basis. The most peculiar thing about this city besides its enormous size was the fact that there were not any buildings with more than 9 floors, and that was probably also why the city had extended on a horizontal scale that much. Furthermore, a lot of green could be seen as trees and parks were everywhere. Nonetheless, transportation from one side of the city to the other was not an issue due to numerous flying buses and cars. Great Naruto City. Welcome. He named the capital city after you? A white-haired woman said in surprise and laughed when she saw the large hologram in the sky at the entrance of the city. He must have done it as a joke, a reddish blonde-haired man laughed. In my first serious mission as a shinobi when I was a kid, we saved an island country from a local mob boss. The locals named the bridge they had built to connect to the mainland after me, the Great Naruto Bridge. The man and the woman were none other than Naruto and Diana. However, they were wearing civilian clothes rather than their combat suit or armor. They had no masks, and no weapons visible on them either. They had come to planet Karna, in the Vega system, as tourists, to visit an old friend, not to fight. All of a sudden, a chorus of gasps came from the other passengers in the flying bus. When Naruto and Diana also turned their heads to their left to look through the window, their reaction was not much different than the others. In the middle of the city, a grand and imposing castle-like building dwarfed everything in its surroundings. It was a temple of massive proportions. Its height alone was over 600 feet. Compared to the rest of the city's buildings which had, at most, only 9 floors, the temple appeared like a behemoth. In the wide plaza in front of the temple, an almost lifelike statue had been erected. It was over 100 feet tall and it depicted 2 beings, both equally tall, a fearsome 10-tailed demonic fox, and a young man with spiky hair, slit eyes, and whisker-like marks on his cheeks. Tens of thousands of people belonging to dozens of different races from the Vega system, and not only, were spread all over the large plaza, snapping pictures and shooting videos. However, there was a certain sense of order despite that they were complete strangers. Nobody was pushing or shoving others, no thieves were trying to pickpocket other people, and nobody was shouting or behaving inappropriately. A feeling of reverence and a sort of holy fear and respect could be sensed from everyone. Are these pilgrims? Diana was the first to realize. In front of the large and lifelike statue, there were long pathways divided by golden ropes where thousands of people stood orderly in queues, waiting for their turn to arrive at the very wide brazier burning in front of the majestic statue with a magical golden fire. Those at the head of their lines were throwing pieces of paper with small, personal prayers written on them, into the golden fire on the brazier before putting their hands in prayer and closing their eyes for a few moments. Then, after bowing deeply at the statue, they would leave, letting others get their turn to pray at the statue too. The guide belonging to the touristic agency that had organized the trip, a human-like being with copper skin and yellow hair, started to inform the passengers of the flying bus about the city and various other things. With a population of over 50 million, Great Naruto City has been built only 2 years ago at the orders of our Lord and Savior, the 10-tailed fox god, Kurama, in honor of his lifelong friend and brother, Uzumaki Naruto. It's the capital city of planet Karna, and it became the capital city of the entire Vega system as well after Lord Kurama annihilated the Psion monarchy and the Citadel Empire. This planet used to be the base of the Gordanian Empire, but they had been wise enough to run away for their lives just before our gods returned to the Vega system. The copper-skinned man was almost fanatic in his speech about Kurama. He ended up describing the feats of his god rather than giving his clients more information about the city. After they got down from the flying bus, Naruto and Diana followed the group to the enormous statue depicting him and Kurama. On the pedestal of the statue there were 2 lines written with gold letters. Kurama, god of destruction, truth, and justice, left. Uzumaki Naruto, best friend and brother of god Kurama, right. However, now that they were right in front of the statue, the group with which Naruto had arrived in the city abruptly turned their heads at him. Wide-eyed, the guide was the first to throw himself to the ground, on his knees. Lord Uzumaki! He shouted in both fear and excitement. There goes our peaceful trip. Naruto muttered under his breath. In a matter of seconds, hundreds and then thousands of people proceeded to throw themselves on their knees and start shouting his name once they realized that the man in their midst was none other than the person in whose honor the statue, the entire city, had been built. What the hell? He whispered, freaked out by their over-the-top behavior. Even as he said those words, a strange sensation washed over him. Hot and cold chills traveled down his spine, and his skin started tingling. A reinvigorating feeling coursed through his veins. He began to feel so powerful in his regular body, that he momentarily thought that he had entered his sage mode by mistake. It's the power of faith, Diana said, startled. As she was a goddess, she could sense clearly the psychic energy that was coming from the thousands of people in the plaza and converging on his body. All of a sudden, a human-sized missile burst through the enormous and intricately ornate gates of the temple and slammed into Naruto. With his reflexes, he could have easily dodged it, but he did not. That's because the one that had burst through the gates of the temple and crashed into him was a human-sized golden fox with 10 tails. Naruto! The biju's deep voice was trembling with emotion as he tackled him into a bear hug. His tails also grabbed Diana and pulled her into the hug as well. If the power of faith had been gathering on Naruto like a small mountain creek before, this time, it was like an ocean. But he could not bring himself to care about that in the present. He was also hugging Kurama for all he was worth. His red eyes became misty in happiness at finally seeing his best friend again. They had been apart for only 2 years, but for them who had been together for more than a century, those 2 years felt much longer. The inside of the Grand Temple was as luxurious as one would imagine by looking at its external appearance. Extremely spacious halls with very high ceilings supported by enormous, but exquisitely carved golden pillars, red carpets on the white marble floors and walls painted with various scenes from God Kurama's feats in battle. Every here and there were lifelike statues of various persons. Naruto saw the 9-tailed beasts, and he even saw a statue of Hagoromo, the Sage of 6 Paths. To his and Diana's hidden surprise, there were also statues of Diana. They both knew that Kurama liked Diana, but Diana herself had not been aware of how deep ran the fox's affection for her. It looked like the fox god had truly come to see her as a family too, because there were only statues of people that Kurama considered his family: his creator, Rikudo Sannin, his siblings, the Biju, Naruto, his former Jinchuriki and brother in all but blood, and lastly, Diana too. As for Kurama, he could not quite control his happiness. He had reverted to his form as a tiny fox cub, and was jumping from Naruto's shoulder to Diana's and talking excitedly about what he had done over the last 2 years. He was acting completely unbecoming of someone his stature. He was a god that ruled over a system with 23 inhabited planets, something that even the king of the Olympian gods had never been able to achieve. He was not supposed to lose his composure like that and make a fool of himself, but Kurama could not care less about such norms at that moment. I saw people lighting up their written prayers in the brazier's fire outside. How does that work? Is it just a scam, or you're really getting everything they're saying? Naruto asked in curiosity after the fox's excitement had settled down for a bit. Godhood is amazing, the golden fox said while taking on a tiger-sized form. It was his preferred size nowadays, and sat on the throne like large, red divan of his throne room. A boy and a girl with golden skin and red hair of Tamaranian origin, if Naruto had to guess, started to softly wave their large feathery fans, cooling the fox god and his guests. After you've chosen your domain and created karma with the people that put their faith in you, you can create a set of laws, a system that will automatically reject anything that clashes against your will. For example, someone praying to win the lottery or asking for other people to meet misfortune for no good reason will naturally get ignored. But say that someone is asking for justice or vengeance, I will naturally hear his plea. Just today I killed a corrupt lawyer that had taken a bribe to fail his innocent client on purpose. His client would have been sentenced to life in prison for a crime he did not commit. A mere thought from me, and both that lawyer and the real criminal died of a stroke. Even as we speak, a section of my mind is listening to my followers' prayers and solving them. Naruto and Diana looked at each other speechlessly. Diana was a goddess too, but when she compared herself to Kurama, she realized just how far below him she was. To kill someone just with a thought, through karma. That difference in power between a stray god like her and a god that was being worshipped by hundreds of billions of living beings was sky high. What if you kill someone by mistake? Did it happen before? Naruto asked. The golden fox wagged his fluffy 10 tails lazily and grinned smugly. That's impossible. I'm the god of truth and justice. What do you mean? It's very simple. People believe that I'm the personification of destruction, truth, and justice. They believe that I am omniscient, so I became almost omniscient. The two of them did not even try to hide their shock at his words. The power of faith is a scary thing, Kyuubi said seriously. It can even change a god's nature if left unchecked. My negative sensing emotions has evolved to untold levels. I can't claim to be omniscient, but nowadays, I can tell anything about someone's past and even what they are thinking, just by looking at them. I can even peek into their future. For example, I know that you've been trying to make a child for nearly 2 years and have seen multiple medics, but none could find a solution. I also know that Diana is hoping for a blue-eyed blonde-haired boy with whisker-like birthmarks on his cheeks, and that you're imagining a little girl with long black hair, blue eyes, and no birthmark on her cheeks. Now that you are in front of me, I know everything about you too. I am a god. Though he was rather startled by the fact that Kurama appeared to have become almost omniscient, Naruto chuckled a little at his manner of speech. If there was one thing that had not changed at his dear friend, it was his pride. How has life been for you after you finished off all your enemies? Isn't it boring to just sit in this temple and listen to people's prayers? Don't you miss going to bounties together with me? I miss wreaking havoc with you like in the past, I will not lie, but I wouldn't change my current life just for that. Countless living beings depend on me now. It's a nice feeling, being needed. Being respected. Being worshipped. Being loved by so many souls. Even after 2 years, I sometimes find myself sighing in amazement. A dangerous beast that had been feared, hated, and imprisoned, had become now a god whom billions worship. Kurama looked at Naruto and Diana with a gentle look in his golden eyes. You should settle down somewhere too, Naruto. Are you not tired of roaming the universe like a vagabond? I would love to have you here with me, both of you. Find a nice place, build a home, root yourself in a place. You have a family to think about now. You're not by your lonesome self anymore. Naruto did not simply dismiss Kyuubi's words. He took Diana's hand and their gazes locked as they communicated through their eyes. I can't wait for your little girl to be born. Uncle Kurama will spoil her rotten. Kurama spoke about himself in the third person and grinned widely. Naruto chuckled at him, but Diana perked up at his words. You said you can peek into our future, is that our future? We will get a child? She asked hopefully. UPS, that was a slip of a tongue, Kurama said and chortled. No, don't you dare. Tell us everything you know. Naruto said, taking her side. So, you two are a package now? I am outnumbered, Looks like little Thea and Uncle Kurama will have to team up against you in the future, the fox said teasingly. But he stopped poking fun at the two of them. He knew very well just how much both Naruto and Diana wished to have a child. For thousands of years, Diana had never even seen any children at all, until she left the Misera and came to the man's world. She also wished to have Naruto's baby, to have a family. As for Naruto, as an orphan, as someone who had lost his homeworld, having a family of his own was the one thing that he had always wanted the most. Especially after experiencing the decade-long dream world of the Black Mercy. The 10-tailed golden fox god stood up from his red divan and walked towards Naruto. You've stopped aging about 90 years ago when you were nearly sucked by that supermassive black hole. We both almost died back then. Kurama said, a thoughtful look on his face. You've become immortal, but you lost your ability to procreate. It was an equivalent exchange. Is there anything you can do about it? Diana pressed on. But of course. Have you forgotten? I'm a god. Kurama said proudly again. As he raised his clawed hand and put it on Naruto's chest, a golden light started to glow around his claw and engulfed Naruto's entire body. Kurama's divinity was being infused into him. 2 years after the disbandment of the Justice League, or 1 year after the death of Superman, a new organization of metahumans had appeared. Like a phoenix that resurrected from its ashes, the Justice League of America had been born from the ashes of the Justice League Unlimited. What was the difference between them though? Besides the several notable absences, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Hawkgirl, 3 of the original 7, the Justice League of America, or shortly said JLA, only handled the crimes within the United States territory. This new Justice League no longer protected the entire planet like before. The reason for that was that, after Superman's death and Supergirl's subsequent killing of the Joker after the massacre that he had committed, most of the countries in the world had taken a page out of Japan's book. They started to follow its example. Especially in Europe and other democratic countries from the rest of the world, numerous hero agencies had been created. Though they had a fancy name, they were simply nothing more, nothing less than professional guilds. They were regulated by the government, and they also paid taxes from their profit, taxes to social insurance, and so on. For the world at large, the apparition of hero agencies had been one of the best things to happen in decades. The crime rate amidst the metahumans' ranks had declined steeply as most metahumans had an easy and legal means of making an honest and easy living with their gifts, which in turn led to a much safer society as regular criminals stood little chance at escaping the countless heroes that seemed to have popped out of nowhere. Many metahumans had been keeping a low profile before, hiding their superpowers. In the present, many heroes had risen to prominence within their countries, with some of them even becoming renowned worldwide, alongside other famous members of the former JL. For example, All Might, a metahuman with a very powerful body from Japan; Caesar, a metahuman capable of conjuring and controlling any bodies of water from Italy; Shi'ar, a metahuman capable of flight and telekinesis from Egypt, and so on. That being said, once a model of democracy and free will, the USA was very different nowadays. The Justice League of America ruled the country from the shadows with an iron fist. While the government still appeared to be in power, various members of the JLA had infiltrated many of its key positions. Even the current president was a puppet that listened to every word that the JLA's council said. Another big difference between the former Justice League and the current JLA was that JLA's members were allowed by the law to use deadly force against criminals. The average Americans were torn, not knowing what to think. On one hand, they felt stifled by the martial law-like environment and by the fact that their free will and rights were restricted, but on the other hand, never before had there been such a low crime rate in the history of the Federation. Whereas Superman had been seen as a gentle giant, a symbol of hope, the current figurehead of the JLA, Supergirl, was a far cry from that. Violent and ruthless, many heinous criminals had been lobotomized or even killed by her. Even corruption was at an all-time low because any officials suspected of corruption would be directly interrogated by Martian Manhunter. Nobody could hide their secrets from the powerful telepath. Some people hated the current state of affairs while others embraced it. The population's opinions were split. A young woman in her late teens or early 20s was flying at a moderate speed above Metropolis City. She was of average height, blonde and blue-eyed, and with a rather sweet and cute face. However, her black cape, black mini-skirt and her black t-shirt with the red S symbol on her chest had become a symbol of either fear or veneration for most people. She was none other than Supergirl, or, how she called herself nowadays, Superwoman. The past year had been very difficult for Supergirl. It had not been an easy task to fight off her former friends and teammates who had wanted to set her straight after what she had done during Superman's funeral. However, much to her surprise, public opinion had supported her actions from back then. It had been to the extent that the Supreme Court of the United States had been forced to drop the trial that they had intended to put Supergirl through. Too many innocent people had been massacred by the Joker. It had been like a wake-up call for the population. Instead of being vilified as they had done with Wonder Woman, Supergirl had been called a hero, someone who had had the guts to do what had to be done. It took the Joker and his gang of criminals to violently murder over 100 innocents for the world to finally understand that some beings were too dangerous to be kept alive. That some humans did not deserve second chances. With public opinion on her side and with Batman's unexpected offer to support her with his wisdom and wealth, Supergirl had come into herself. Nowadays, Supergirl was no longer just the cute sidekick of Superman who played around and fought crime out of boredom, just to escape being stuck at a farm in Kansas. Nowadays, Supergirl had become Superwoman. A fierce defender of the innocents and a wrathful vigilante against criminals. She had become the leading figure of the Justice League of America, supported from the shadows by the Dark Knight of Gotham, Batman. Flying above Metropolis City was a habit she had developed a few years ago. She used to patrol the large city and help Superman to maintain peace and order. But these days nobody was crazy enough to try anything in Metropolis anymore. Everyone knew that if Superwoman caught them, at best they would be lobotomized, and then imprisoned or, at worst, they would be killed. These days, Superwoman was still patrolling the city mostly as a means of relaxation, and to help with any spontaneous hazards she might encounter, such as a house on fire or some serious accidents that regular people would find it challenging to handle by themselves. That day, however, the usual peace was interrupted by Martian Manhunter's telepathic message. His voice was filled with urgency when he said, "Superwoman, Batman's brother AI has detected hundreds of time-space irregularities in the exosphere of the planet. Boom tubes." No sooner than his telepathic message ended, a wormhole was ripped into the sky above Metropolis. A bone-chilling cry was heard over all the noise of the large city. Savage screams and bloodthirsty shrieks. The skies had turned gray as a swarm of winged demonic beings darkened the light of the day. Hundreds upon hundreds of parademons were flying from the enormous boom tube in an ending stream. A massive being radiating an aura of power walked slowly from behind them, stepping on air as if it was solid ground. Over 40 feet tall, extremely muscular, gray-skinned, red-eyed, and wearing purple-black armor, it was none other than the god of Apocalypse, Darkseid. Chapter 50 Sacrifice. A wormhole was ripped into the sky above Metropolis, and a horrible cry was heard over all the noise of the large city. Savage screams and bloodthirsty shrieks. The skies had turned gray as a swarm of winged demonic beings darkened the light of the day. Thousands upon thousands of parademons were flying from the enormous boom tube in an ending stream. A massive being radiating an aura of power walked slowly from behind them, stepping on air as if it was solid ground. Over 40 feet tall, extremely muscular, gray-skinned, red-eyed, and wearing purple-black armor, it was none other than the god of Apocalypse, Darkseid. He floated above the large city with his hands behind his back, watching the world beneath his feet as if they were ants. They could not catch his interest. But when he saw a black-costumed blonde young woman with a red S on her chest, a smirk appeared on his terrible-looking face. Even as dozens of new members of the Justice League of America, JLA, were being teleported behind Superwoman, the god of evil was not in a hurry. He just stood in the air in the same arrogant posture, with his hands at his back. It was as if he was waiting for JLA to gather its entire forces before finally crushing them. His parademons were also flying orderly behind him. "You shouldn't have come here, Darkseid. We've killed you once before. We will do it again." Superwoman spat. "I have underestimated you once and I paid for it. But now it's your turn to pay for your audacity," Darkseid's deep voice rang. "The skies will rain fire, the oceans will boil, and the streets will run red with the blood of billions. Only then, after your last pitiful hope is extinguished, will I end your lives. For I am entropy. I am death. I am Darkseid." As the god of evil raised a hand from behind his back, his parademons burst into bone-chilling roars and launched themselves crazily at the metahumans flying in the air. The members of the JLA were not lacking in momentum either. As a deafening thunderclap rang, 5 parademons fell to the ground lifelessly, their entire bodies charred black and smoking. With a battle cry, Shazam was the first to lead the vanguard of the Justice League against the invaders. A blade-like laser beam cut over 10 parademons in half, from the waist. Cyborg was on a rampage. His left arm transformed into a particle cannon, and he prepared himself to shoot an even more powerful attack. However, before he could fire it, 2 crimson beams of light flooded his entire vision. Then, he knew no more. It had happened in an instant. Darkseid's red eyes were still burning with his Omega beams after firing them. However, there was nothing left of Cyborg in this world. He had been reduced to ashes. "Cyborg!" Starfire cried out heartbroken. However, there was no time for mourning on the battlefield. Distracted as she was by the death of a dear comrade, the Tamaranian princess never saw the 2 parademons that lunged at her from her blind spot. It was only Jon Stewart's timely intervention that saved her from being impaled in the back. Instead, the parademon's claws smashed against a green constructive light in the shape of a sphere. Superwoman suddenly let out a powerful shout, one that reverberated through the entire city. Dozens of parademons among the large group surrounding her fell from the air with blood flowing from their eyes and ears from the sound wave. Even her allies, the rest of the JLA members, despite wearing earplugs, felt their bodies shake, and their heads hurt too from how powerful the sound had been. Breaking free of her encirclement, the young Argonian left sonic booms in her wake as she flew at Darkseid like a speeding bullet. The god of apocalypse greeted her attack with a mocking grin, meeting her punch head-on. A 5 feet 6 inches girl's fist smashing against the fist of a giant over 40 feet tall. The difference in size was ridiculous, it was like a house cat clashing against a bull. However, the result betrayed even Darkseid's expectations. The mocking smirk on his face vanished the moment he felt the insane power behind her punch. It was no weaker than that of his late enemy, Superman. Boom. Despite that the fight was taking place nearly 1 mile above Metropolis, the shockwave that their clash had generated shattered all windows on the upper floors of the taller skyscrapers of the city below. Most of the members of the Justice League, and even the parademons, quickly steered away from the 2 powerful beings' proximity, afraid of being caught in their clash. Nevertheless, not everyone shied away from the devastating battle between Superwoman and Darkseid. A rocket of green light burst forth from Green Lantern's power ring towards Darkseid, forcing the god to meet its charge with a powerful punch of his own. The construct of light was smashed into pieces that faded into nothingness, but Darkseid left himself open in the process. A muscular man flew below him and shouted, "Shazam!" Like magic, the sky suddenly turned black and lightning struck down. "Rarg!" Darkseid screamed, but then he stomped with his foot into Shazam's face. The boy-turned-superhero was launched towards the ground like a cannonball. An entire skyscraper was demolished by Shazam's unconscious body. Several thousand people were killed in an instant. "We have to take the fight out of Metropolis." Green Lantern screamed, his face livid with fury. So many innocents dying in crossfire at the very beginning of the fight was like a bucket of ice-cold water that had been poured on the superheroes' heads. The Justice League had not ignored the warning of Green Arrow that Darkseid would return. Ever since JLA had been established a year before, they had run multiple simulations, plans, and strategies on how to deal with Darkseid's next invasion. However, the reality was different from what they had expected. "Do not panic." Batman's cold voice came through the comms of the JLA members. "Stick to the plan. We have to gouge out his two eyes first." A hero riding a winged white horse, wearing a knight's armor, and wielding a sword courageously flew ahead and stabbed towards Darkseid's head, but a parademon cut his way and tackled him off his flying horse. Sir Justin had not even made it to the ground because 3 parademons ripped his armor off him, and then his body too, to shreds, amidst his terrible dying screams. A blonde girl wearing a blue costume with a star motif on her chest, and wielding a golden staff shouted in anger as a golden energy blast cleared the skies around her of the parademons surrounding her. Then, she flew at Darkseid in a rage. At the same, Superwoman's eyes glowed red and the group of over 20 parademons that were trying to surround her again were incinerated. Breaking the sound barrier once more, she lunged at the god of evil again. All of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, a green serpentine dragon appeared below Darkseid and coiled itself around him, briefly immobilizing him. Wielding her cosmic staff, Stargirl plunged its sharp end straight into the giant god's left red eye. Screaming in rage and pain, a blue electricity-like energy attack suddenly burst out from Darkseid's body. It was the Matrix of Agony. The green serpentine dragon coiled around his body suddenly changed its shape and fell down as it transformed into Martian Manhunter. The Martian was screaming in untold pain, seemingly out of his mind as he fell down. Darkseid's remaining eye glowed crimson, about to fire another round of Omega beams, but Superwoman's kick smashed powerfully into his face. The huge 40 feet tall giant was sent flying towards the ocean, rolling and tumbling through the air like a broken kite. Even as Darkseid fell into the ocean, the Justice League gave him no rest. A red lightning-like human being flashed across the turbid ocean waters and started to run in circles around the spot where he had fallen. A hurricane took form and a wall of water rose from the ocean, kicking the god of evil out of the water. Still in midair, before he could get a chance to regain his balance, Darkseid was blasted backwards once again as Starfire fired a giant green energy blast from her hands. Jon Stewart also followed up with an enormous hammer of green light which he smashed into Darkseid's head, sending his giant body tumbling across the ocean water like a skipping stone. With a shout of pain and anger, Darkseid righted his body in the air. "Parademons! Ignore the Justice League. Kill those pitiful humans in the city." Color drained from the heroes' faces. They had never expected that Darkseid, despite getting beaten up and dominated by teamwork, would all of a sudden switch his focus from them onto the bystanders. The words of their god were law for them. The bloodthirsty parademons stopped attacking the superheroes and flew towards the shore, towards the city. They threw themselves onto the helpless civilians in the city like a pack of wolves in a herd of sheep. Men, women, children, elderly, none were spared. Hundreds of innocent people had been brutally killed in less than a minute, and the parademons showed no signs of stopping. It was not in their nature to be merciful. Slaughter was the sole purpose of their existence. Despite having been blinded by one eye and battered by the Justice League's attacks, Darkseid revealed an ugly grin as he heard the death throes screams coming from the city. Hearing people's death throes screams, it warms one's heart, doesn't it? Darkseid chuckled darkly. My only regret is that Kal-El is no longer alive to hear this wonderful concert. I wish he was here. I wish I could see his face, twisted from rage and suffering as his heart bled for those insignificant ants below. The god of evil's mockery made the Justice League boil with rage. Fate. Batman called out, and a portal in the form of an ankh appeared in the air above Metropolis City. I am sorry. We have no other choice. Kent Nelson's face was serene under his golden helmet. You do not need to apologize. Compared to other people, I have lived a long life. What is my life compared to the lives of 10 million? The sorcerer said. Have you contacted Wonder Woman and Caterpillar? Batman asked after a moment of silence. Green Arrow is calling them now. Dr. Fate replied. Do you think they will answer your call? Will they listen to your request? Batman asked another question. They will. Uzumaki had given me his word, Fate said calmly. Then, he changed the subject. I need someone to protect me while I cast this spell. Roger, Batman replied, and then he terminated the connection. Flash, Green Lantern, head back to Metropolis. Protect Dr. Fate at all costs. Even with your life. He called the two heroes and said. It was not only in the United States that the army of parademons was wreaking havoc. Every large city and urban agglomeration on the planet had been attacked simultaneously by hordes upon hordes of flying demons. It was not only parademons either. New boom tubes were being constantly opened as other kinds of troops were being transported over to Earth. War machines of immense sizes, robots, and other types of monstrous creatures too. The military and the hero agencies from all over the globe were fighting together against the invaders, but the losses were terrible on both sides. Hundreds of metahumans and thousands of soldiers were losing their lives with every passing minute. It was a bitter battle, a battle for survival. Naruto, Diana, and Kurama were together, eating some delicious fruits native to planet Karna and catching up with each other. They were talking about what they had been up to over the past 2 years when a very annoying beeping sound disturbed them. Naruto's first intention was to ignore it, but the golden fox had other thoughts. You better pick that up, Kurama said seriously. Naruto looked at him inquisitively but chose to listen to his words and took out his lightwave device. Tapping on it to accept the call, it was the hologram of a masked blonde man wearing a feathered green hat. It was none other than Green Arrow. Wonder Woman, Mr. Uzumaki. Darkseid has invaded the Earth. The bow-wielding hero said directly, without any pleasantries. The tone of his voice was filled with urgency. What's the situation? Diana asked. Though inwardly surprised at the Amazon's drastically different hair color, Green Arrow did not comment on it. There was no time for chatting about such trivial matters. Darkseid and his army of parademons invaded through hundreds of boom tubes. He sent his parademons and war machines all over the planet, to the biggest urban agglomerations on each continent. As for Darkseid himself, he came to Metropolis. Shining Knight, Cyborg and probably Shazam too have already fallen. Martian Manhunter's fate is unknown. Superwoman is enraged. Hearing that several members of the Justice League have already died made Diana descend into momentary silence. She asked after a while, who is Superwoman? Supergirl. She grew up. She is one of the 2 leaders of the Justice League of America together with Batman. That's what she calls herself nowadays, Green Arrow replied. Where is Dr. Fate? How come you're the one who was using his lightwave device? Did he die too? Naruto asked. Another brief moment of silence was instilled. Eventually, Green Arrow said. Darkseid ordered his parademons to ignore the Justice League and attack the people in the city. There are thousands of them, we cannot stop them all. Dr. Fate is going to cast a powerful area of effect spell to keep them away. The situation truly seemed very urgent. Diana stood up and said. Hold on for 1 hour. Tell everyone to keep on fighting for 1 hour. That's how long it will take us to space warp there. I can send you there directly. Kurama unexpectedly said. Both Naruto and Diana turned to look at him in surprise. They remembered at that moment that, as one of the more powerful Olympian gods, Athena had been able of opening portals too. It looked like the power of faith that Kurama had gathered was not any less than that of Athena, seeing as he was capable of doing similar things. Are you coming with us? Naruto asked hopefully. No. QB refused directly. I don't care about that planet. Vega system is my home, not Earth. But if you end up in mortal peril, you can summon my avatar. Just like you used to summon your toads in the past. I will come and rescue you. Naruto looked at the fox weirdly. In the past, between the two of them, it was him who used to be stronger. However, it looked like in the present, Kurama believed that he was in a completely different league altogether, to the point where just his avatar would be able to defeat an enemy that Naruto and Diana could not handle together. The blonde did not know what to think. The summoning jutsu? How would that work to summon your avatar? He asked. I have infused you with my divinity. We are connected. Or, better said, you are my apostle now. Kurama said and laughed arrogantly, very pleased with himself. We don't have time for this. Diana burst from the side impatiently. More people are dying every second we waste. QB stopped joking around and waved his claw in front of him, as if he was slashing at the air. 5 white claws marks appeared in midair, as if the membrane of reality had been ripped. The claw marks in the air widened until a rift larger than a human's body was torn open and a portal appeared. They could see the tall skyscrapers of Metropolis beyond it. Is Dr. Fate not done yet? Flash complained as he blitzed past 15 parademons and punched them to death with aid of Speed Force. Green Lantern also created a sharp whip of light that smashed any parademon that came too close to the sorcerer, that was levitating in the air in a cross-legged position. Dr. Fate had been casting that spell for over 3 minutes already. If you have enough time to chat, go and kill more parademons. Jon shouted at him, not in the mood to listen to the speedster's complaints. Not after witnessing the deaths of so many innocent people. A golden light in the form of an Ankh suddenly appeared between Dr. Fate's hands, and he opened his eyes behind his helmet. A quiet, morning voice came from his mouth. Nabu's Law of Order. The Golden Ankh flew up from his hands in the air. As it gained altitude, the Ankh of light increased in size exponentially. It grew enormous, to the point where it dwarfed the entire city, bathing it in a golden light. As the divine light expanded outwards, any parademon it touched was turned into dust like a miracle. It did not kill only the parademons. Even some humans or metahumans from Earth that thought about taking advantage of the state of chaos and despair to loot and rob stores, or to commit other crimes, were also turned into dust. However, the Ankh of divine light did not harm innocents in the least. Quite the opposite, it began healing their injuries. In hospitals, even patients that were surviving only thanks to being wired to medical machines suddenly regained their consciousness as their terminal illnesses were healed. Even the Justice League and Darkseid, who had been battling above the ocean, had become still at that spectacular scene. There was a trace of shock in Darkseid's remaining eye, never having expected a human from Earth to be able to use the true power of one of the Lords of Order. However, despite learning from the other members of the JLA that were in the city to help and protect the civilians that the parademons were being erased from existence, Superwoman, Stargirl, Steel and the other heroes fighting against Darkseid were not showing any signs of joy. They knew the price that Dr. Fate had paid for casting that spell. As the golden light had expanded to engulf the entire city, kill all hostiles, and heal all injuries, Dr. Fate's face visibly aged under his golden helmet. The price of casting Nabu's Law of Order was his lifespan. His skin became rough and ridden with age marks, his teeth fell from his mouth, his grizzled hair became snow white, and then fell off from his head too. But he had no intention of stopping. The Ankh of golden light continued to expand towards the ocean. For the first time since showing up on Earth, Darkseid revealed a look of fear on his face. Completely ignoring the attacks of the other members of the JLA surrounding him, the god of evil flew in the open ocean, trying to put as much distance, as fast as possible, between him and the shore, between him and that golden Ankh of light. Nevertheless, in spite of Dr. Fate's tenacity, he reached his limit eventually. The forbidden spell had devoured his entire lifespan. But even as he died, Dr. Fate did not show regret, nor sadness, nor fear. He felt that his over 100 years of life spent fighting against evil did not amount to as much as he had done in the last few minutes of his life. He closed his eyes, a serene expression on his face. He had died fighting to protect the innocent. He had sacrificed his life for the sake of saving 10 million others. There was no nobler way to die than that. Chapter 51 Darkseid. When another portal opened in the skies above Metropolis City, nobody noticed it. Though the Parademon's rampage had not lasted for long before Dr. Fate's spell annihilated them, those few minutes had been enough for hundreds of people to die and for the entire city to be thrown into chaos. "Where's everyone?" Naruto was the first to ask after coming out of the portal that Kurama had created to transport them. Wonder Woman frowned and looked around as she even flew down from the skies, closer to the city below. She could see no metahumans fighting, no Darkseid, and no parademons. There were just regular people, running about in a panic and the police forces looking as scared and unorganized as the rest of the civilians. Naruto and Diana arrived only moments after Dr. Fate's forbidden spell had erased all traces of enemies from Metropolis City, and even put Darkseid on the run. "Give me a moment," he said and closed his eyes. When he opened them, his pupils became a horizontal bar crossed by a slit, and an orange pigmentation appeared at the corners of his eyes. He had entered Sage Mode. Every life signature in the city appeared in his mind's eye as he focused on the sensing ability of his Sage Mode. There were so many people below over 10 million that he could never hope to single out a random guy out of them. However, metahuman's life signature was different from that of regular humans, to speak nothing of that of a god. Brighter, stronger, bigger. Sometimes even of a different color. Maybe they managed to move the fight away from the city. It's definitely something that Jon and Batman would think about in order to reduce crossfire casualties. Expand your senses towards the ocean, Wonder Woman reasoned. Following her advice, he did focus his Sage Mode sense towards the ocean. And there, a few miles away from the shore, a group of very powerful life signatures appeared on his radar. "It's as you said. They're out, in the open ocean, at 7 o'clock. A coat of yellow-red chakra appeared around his body and transformed his clothes into a garment of light and energy. 10 ominous black spheres appeared at his back as well. He had entered his six-path Sage Mode. "You're faster, go ahead. Take my dagger and throw it at Darkseid, in his blind spot. I will teleport there in an instant, with a very big surprise for him," he said and began to form a Bijudama into his left hand. Despite the dire situation, Diana let out a smile at his words. She took the tri-pronged dagger from his right hand and raised her other hand at him, balling into a fist. "You don't have a long time in that form while on Earth. Let's end this fast," she said. "Yes. You take care too, don't get overconfident," he chided. "Right back at you." Sharing a smile, the two bumped their fists against each other. Then, a sonic boom echoed in the air as Diana burst at her fastest speed towards Darkseid's location. Wonder Woman arrived at the scene just in time to witness how Darkseid fired an Omega beam out of his remaining eye and reaped the life of yet another member of the Justice League of America. Steel was disintegrated, down to the tiniest atoms. His sledgehammer was the only thing that had remained of him, as he had dropped it right before the beam hit him. A powerful voice resounded across the battlefield. "In brightest day, in darkest night. No evil shall escape my sight." As Jon Stewart said the oath of the Green Lantern Corps, a brilliant green light started gathering into his power ring. Witnessing yet another comrade dying in front of him, he cursed his weakness. He cursed his own lack of will, lack of strength to attack with the intent to kill. Even after the Justice League was reformed by Superwoman and Batman into the Justice League of America, which used deadly force and extreme means against incurable criminals, Jon Stewart himself had never broken the code of the Green Lanterns, that of never using deadly force. 1. However, at this moment, filled with righteous anger and determination, he told himself, "No more. If the Guardians will strip me of my ring and exile or imprison me, then so be it." He could no longer watch any more of his comrades perish in battle. Too many had died already. Bearing that bitterness and extreme determination, he shouted the last two verses of the oath at the top of his lungs. "Let those who worship evil's might beware of my power, Green Lantern's light." Green light shone around his ring so brightly that his body could not be seen clearly anymore. Warning: willpower exceeding power ring capabilities. 2. But Jon did not realize what he had just done at that moment, that his will had surpassed the limits of the most powerful weapon in the universe, that he had found the limits of what was supposed to be limitless. No, he was only thinking about one thing: killing Darkseid to save his brothers in arms. The god of evil abruptly released another wave of his matrix of agony, making all the heroes attacking him collapse from the air while screaming in agony. Superwoman had been among them too, and she fell into the ocean as well, her body twitching uncontrollably from the excruciating pain. 3. Then, Darkseid turned his head towards the Green Lantern. His supernatural senses warned him of mortal danger. In front of him, Jon Stewart was a sight to behold. He had seen many and even killed a bunch of Green Lanterns himself. However, never before had he seen a Green Lantern exuding such power. It was just as he locked his remaining eye on him to fire his Omega beams that Jon Stewart also pointed his power ring at him. It was as if a railgun was fired. A beam of light like that of a star-destroying cannon shot forth from his ring. A beam of light containing the transformed will of the man who even managed to surpass the limits of the most powerful weapon in the universe. Momentarily, everyone was blinded by the brilliant emerald light, Wonder Woman included. When they opened their eyes, everyone stared in disbelief at the sight in front of them. The god of evil, Darkseid, he had been vaporized. Only his head, the upper part of his torso, and his left arm had been left intact. Everything else had been erased by the beam of green light. Darkseid had managed to avoid instant death by dodging just a bit at the very last instant. Nevertheless, he was only seconds away from death. However, right before dying, just as the still surviving members of the Justice League let their guards down thinking that they had finally won, Darkseid's remaining eye glowed with a red light. It was an Omega beam, locked on Jon Stewart, fired with the last bit of his life force. A last attack, as a fuck you before dying. The members of the Justice League were caught off guard. They had not expected Darkseid to fire yet another Omega beam with his dying breath. Jon Stewart himself was too mentally exhausted too after firing the strongest attack in his life. He could not dodge it in time. Nevertheless, he did not close his eyes. He kept them open, staring death in the face, unafraid. He did not wish to die, but he was not afraid of dying either. At heart, he was still a Marine, he was still military. He had long prepared his mind for this outcome. If anything, he was content. He was going to die in a battle against a god after he managed to protect his comrades. A split of second before the Omega beam impacted Jon Stewart's defenseless body, a white and gold armored silhouette seemingly teleported in front of him. It was a body flicker movement. Diana had appeared in front of him at the very last moment with a shunshin, her golden shield raised protectively in front of her. A deep sound like that of a gong resounded for miles when Darkseid's Omega beam slammed into the golden shield. But after a brief struggle, the Omega beam dissipated. Wonder Woman's golden shield was made of Amazonium, the same as her bracelets of submission. It was one of the very few things in the universe that could resist the effect of Darkseid's Omega beams. Impotent rage boiled in Darkseid as he watched his last-ditch attack fail. He could not accept that he had lost against the Justice League again. He could not accept the fact that he could not even kill the girl who had gouged out his eye or the Green Lantern that had vaporized his body. However, he could not even scream to express his indignation, because he had used his entire strength to fire that last Omega beam. Now, he was like a flickering candle at the end of its wick. He could no longer maintain his flight. Even as what remained of his body fell into the ocean, Darkseid could not accept his defeat. He was enraged like never before. Everyone watched silently as the tyrant god's remains fell from the sky. However, Superwoman, who had recovered herself and flew out of the ocean, grabbed Darkseid's corpse before it could sink into the water. Then, her eyes burst with red light. Lacking the life force of a god to protect it, the remains of Darkseid could not resist her heat vision. It was reduced to ash. Wonder Woman? Green Lantern called out tentatively, unsure of the identity of the white-haired woman in front of him. Her face and body did look like that of his former teammate, but her hair and demeanor were different. Furthermore, it was too big a coincidence that she had just happened to return now when Darkseid invaded the Earth. To his knowledge, Wonder Woman was supposed to be traveling the universe together with her mercenary lover, not be on Earth. In the flesh. "It's good to see you, Jon," Diana replied with a smile. Mixed feelings flashed in Green Lantern's eyes. Joy at having escaped alive when he thought everything was over. Gratitude at her for saving his life. And regret for how he had treated her in the past because, hell, he had ended up doing the same thing as her, using lethal force against someone instead of following the law. "You saved my life." "Thank you," he said and lowered his head. A proud man he might have been, but not an ungrateful one. The members of the Justice League that were still alive threw a look of curiosity at the newly arrived white-haired woman, but did not come to talk to her. They quickly flew down, towards the ocean, searching for their fellow teammates that had collapsed when Darkseid hit them with the Matrix of Agony. They also went searching for Martian Manhunter's body, to see whether he was alive or dead. Only Supergirl Superwoman came to Wonder Woman. The fierce woman that had fought fist for fist against Darkseid, and had completely incinerated his lifeless body only a moment ago, the first thing that woman did was to take the Amazonian princess in a hug. But it was not for long. "I'm glad to see you. And thank you for saving Jon's life," Superwoman said. "But I'm afraid there's still much work to do. Will you stay around for a while? Maybe we could catch up tomorrow." Diana nodded in understanding. "Sure. Naruto will want to see you too." After that quick hug and brief exchange, Superwoman flew away in search of her fallen teammates. "You should go too, Jon. You have your duties." "I won't leave the Earth right away." Green Lantern nodded and flew away too. 2 minutes later, Naruto arrived at the scene with his six-path Sage mode cancelled, in his base form, and looked at Diana in curiosity. "I was waiting for you to teleport me here when I sensed Darkseid's life signature vanishing. Did you actually kill him by yourself?" "I didn't get to do anything at all," Diana said with a shake of her head. "The Justice League did it. Many of them have fallen, but they did kill Darkseid, all by themselves." The mercenary and the goddess look at each other, not knowing what to think about the situation. "It's kinda anticlimactic, isn't it?" Naruto said eventually. "It is. I'm bummed out if I'm being honest," Diana admitted, making him chuckle. "I get what you mean. All that training to immobilize Darkseid, and then use the spirit was for naught. Not to mention all the trouble we went through so we could forge that rad ion spear. But all's well that ends well." "Let's not complain," Naruto said. Though that's what his words were, there was a nagging feeling at the back of his head. Like things had been too easy. He and Diana had not even gotten the chance to participate. Goddess Athena had made Darkseid out to be some sort of nigh-invincible being whose mere avatars were enough to overwhelm entire groups of superpowered metahumans. Did the Justice League get that much stronger? He asked. "I think so. There is a change in their mindset. None of them is pulling punches anymore. Some of them have even surpassed their previous limits. That blast that Green Lantern had fired before, even you'd probably be vaporized if it hit you," she said. "If it hit me, and that's a big if," he countered smugly. Yeah, you can teleport everywhere, yada yada." She rolled her eyes at him. She was annoyed that she had still not managed to learn Naruto's Hiraishin technique, and he never missed a chance to throw it in her face. "Well, I can't teleport everywhere. I can teleport where it matters though," he said and kissed her on the cheek. "Flatterer," she said, unable to hold back her smile. By where it matters he was referring to her because she had inked on her shoulder the teleportation formulae of the Hiraishin a while ago, so Naruto would be able to always teleport at her side. Her goal for the immediate future was to learn the Hiraishin too, so Naruto would ink on his body her own teleportation formula as well. It would be their own thing, as a couple, to be able to teleport at each other's side at any moment. Despite her upbringing as a warrior princess, she was a hopeless romantic at heart. While the two of them began to flirt as if they were alone in the entire world, a deafening sound akin to that of glass shattering was heard. It was a sound heard not only by them, but by the entire population of Metropolis, no, the entire population of the United States. Crack after crack started to appear in the sky above the continent, and the rupture started to extend towards the ocean too. "What the hell?" Naruto said. A feeling of trepidation rose in his heart. It was not that different from when he had nearly died in his encounter with the supermassive black hole many decades ago. A bad feeling rose in his heart. Another sound similar to that of glass shattering was heard, and the cracks in the sky were ruptured completely. Pieces of the sky burst apart, and an enormous rift of darkness was ripped open. A massive thing was trying to force its way through it. "By the gods! Is that a finger?" Diana said in disbelief. Then, more deafening cracks were heard and the sky was shattered completely. The rupture spread from one side of the planet's exosphere to the other. Every living being in the northern hemisphere of the Earth that looked at the sky at that moment could see it. It was a giant hand. So large that they could not clearly see its ends. The ocean started roaring and enormous tsunami waves like the modern world had never seen before rose towards the coast. Earthquakes so powerful that the ground was ruptured, and even volcanoes from all over the globe were showing signs of starting to erupt. It was the apocalypse. That enormous hand was even larger than the Earth. An object so immense suddenly appearing so close had destabilized the entire planet with its gravity. Just by existing there, without even needing to do anything else, that immense hand would cause the extermination of all life on Earth. However, it looked like the owner of that hand was not content with just waiting and watching for the life on Earth to slowly die out. That black hand started to grow in size in the eyes of everyone. It was closing in on the planet. The closer it got, the more disastrous the cataclysmic phenomenons on Earth became, and the more the terror in the hearts of all living beings grew. Naruto and Diana were no different, their hearts seized by a primordial fear. However, they soon came back to their senses. Naruto was suddenly engulfed by the cloak of his six-path sage mode and 10 purple-black spheres appeared behind his back. Then, he teleported down, right on top of the ocean's water, which was ravaged by mountain-high tsunami waves. "Help me so I can help you." It was a call of his soul for the planet. Naruto doubted that Kurama, even with his newfound powers, would have any chance at stopping that enormous hand in the sky. It was power beyond anything that they had seen before. However, even in the midst of despair, he did not give up all hope. There was still one thing that he could try, his strongest technique. As he closed his eyes and connected with nature, the mountain-high tsunami waves around him suddenly leveled down, and the ocean became still for dozens of miles. Nature energy began to gather onto his body like an endless waterfall. It was the purest natural energy he had ever absorbed, even purer than the one from his pristine and untainted by civilization planet, Mayaboku. It was something that should not exist on Earth. The planet was willingly giving him its essence. It was all for the sake of surviving. When opened his eyes and glared at the enormous hand in the sky, the 10 truth-seeking balls at his back converged into one and flew to his right hand, where they took the shape of a helix-like black spear. It was similar in appearance to the sword of Nunaboko that Obito had used while controlling the power of 10 tails. As nature continued to pour its true essence into him, the helix-shaped spear started to increase in length, 10 feet, 50 feet, 200 feet, 1 mile, 5 miles. It continued to grow, and it became so long that its end could not be seen with the naked eye. It was a fantastic scene, like a scene out of a legendary tale of gods and demons in the myths. A tiny being facing off against a world-destroying black hand, larger than even the planet. Naruto did not know how heavy that interminable helix-shaped spear in his hands were. He only knew that even with the godly increment in power coming from the vital natural energy of the planet, he felt as if his arms were about to be ripped off from how hard he was straining himself to hold it straight. The black hand was now so close to the planet that it had covered the entire sky. All light had disappeared, and it became as dark as in the middle of the night. The fingers of that hand began to slowly close in. If that hand clenched into a fist, it was going to squish the entire planet into nothingness. Amenno no Hoko. It took his entire strength to rasp out this name. But he had to. It was a divine attack, one that could not be launched otherwise. Just like Izanami and Izanagi had used the Amenno no Hoko, heavenly jeweled spear, in the myths to split the world, Naruto slashed with his helix-shaped spear at the black hand. It was an attack powerful enough to even split a planet in two. A scream of pain came through the gap between the dimensions, one that was heard all across the globe. However, when Naruto looked at the results of his all-out attack, hopelessness filled his eyes. He had used his entire chakra, and even the true essence of the planet, only to cut off a finger. At that moment, Diana came next to him and supported his exhausted body with her arms. "This is the end," he said bitterly. They held each other's hands as they watched the enormous black hand in the sky closing around the planet. It was unlike them to give up. However, that was the reality at that moment. There were beings in the universe at large capable of destroying entire galaxies with a thought, to say nothing about a mere planet. It was a fact that Naruto had always acknowledged, ever since his close shave with death during his encounter with the supermassive black hole. In the end, death claims us all. It's only a matter of when. I've lived a long life. I'm even fortunate enough to have found you before dying. I am a lucky man. I love you, Diana said and smiled weakly as she interlocked her fingers with his. We'll always be together. Yes. In life or in death. Together. Always. Chapter 52 Morningstar. In the end, death claims us all. It's only a matter of when. I've lived a long life. I was even fortunate enough to find someone like you before dying. I am a lucky man. I love you, Diana said and smiled weakly as she interlocked her fingers with his. We'll always be together. Yes. In life or in death. Together. Always. They were not the kind of persons that would normally give up in front of adversity. But there was a limit to that too. What could one do against a being whose mere hand was larger than an entire planet? Just by existing, its size alone was enough to cause cataclysms on Earth. Though Naruto had severed one of the immense fingers of the black hand, the continent-sized finger and the ocean-like quantity of blood pouring from the wound did not fall on Earth because the hand was so large that it generated a gravitational force stronger than that of the planet. Nevertheless, while the catastrophic scenario where the immense finger crashed on the planet was avoided, it did not matter all that much in the end. The skies turned pitch black everywhere, regardless of whether it was the eastern or western hemispheres. The sun, the moon, the stars, all seemed to have vanished as Darkseid's hand clenched around the planet. Just as Naruto and Diana said their final goodbyes, they felt their bodies whisked away. She did not know what was happening, but Naruto had experienced that feeling once before. When the two of them regained their eyesight, a 10-tailed golden fox appeared in front of their eyes. Did you seriously think I'd ever abandon you? Momentarily, the two of them were speechless. How? Diana uttered. She had already made peace with herself and comforted herself with the thought that she would be together with her loved one in death. She had not expected that she was going to survive the day. It was Naruto who answered her, reverse summoning technique. He had been reverse summoned like that once before, by the elder toad Fukasaku, to Konoha, to fight against pain. However, it had happened only once in his life, about 100 years ago. He had forgotten that the summoning jutsu could be used not only by him, but by the other contracted creature too. Too many years had passed since then. Anticipating what the princess was about to ask, Kurama said, "There's nothing I can do about your planet. Darkseid's power transcends the laws of the universe. I'm sorry." Even the usually arrogant and proud fox had a somber look on his face. In his mind, he could not help thinking, what if Darkseid's target had been the Vega system? What would I have done? It was the first time in his millennia-long life that he had found a home, a place where people respected him. A place where he was loved and even worshipped. Witnessing the true power of the god of evil was like a wake-up call for him. He had believed himself invincible after ascending to godhood, but now, he realized that he was far from that. It was the same for Naruto as well. Although he wasn't arrogant and proud like the fox, he still considered himself an existence that stood at the apex of the universe. After all, ever since he had arrived in this new universe, he had yet to encounter a being more powerful than himself. He had even defeated the god of underworld, and that while not having access to his strongest form. Especially his last attack that had sliced through Darkseid's finger off was powerful enough to destroy planets. Even so, in front of absolute power, nothing matters. Ever since he had almost died after he passed the event horizon of that supermassive black hole in his youth, Naruto had acknowledged the existence of a higher power, of a being much more powerful than anyone else. He called it the Void. Despite that nowadays he had become powerful enough to be confident of defeating even 3 of Kagaya at once, in front of the limitless power of the black hole he felt insignificant. True Darkseid's enormous hand reminded him once again of that feeling. Naruto took Diana in his arms, and they embraced each other. Although they had escaped with their lives, they were in no mood for celebration. The Earth was Diana's homeworld. Her planet and its over 7 billion inhabitants were going to disappear. Perth, Western Australia. A tall and handsome young man with unruly blonde hair sat on a sunbed, on the beach, absent-mindedly looking at the ocean painted by the orange-red rays of the sunset. However, it looked like he was not paying any attention to the gorgeous scenery in front of his eyes. His eyes were vacant and his face blank. It seemed as if there was a lot on his mind. Suddenly, a raspy voice shook him awake from his thoughts. "You know, I've seen you before, mate. Down on the beach, sleeping rough, are we?" It was a slightly overweight old man wearing white shorts, a gray short-sleeved shirt, and a hat and carrying a stick in his hand. "I suppose that we are," the blond man replied after a moment. "It can get a bit warm in the daytime, but crack a tube, or go for a dip, and you're right as rain." "There are worse places," the old man said, and then he sat down on the sand, next to the young man's sunbed. "I come down here most evenings to watch the sunset," he continued, wanting to chat more. "It's a beauty tonight, isn't it?" "Yes, I suppose that it is," the young man said again, and leaned with his back on the sunbed to better watch the sunset. The old man continued, seemingly not bothered by the youngster's apparent lack of interest. "I used to come here with the wife and twins. Darren got himself killed in Vietnam, and Sean crashed the car. As for my wife, she got a lump in her breast and... Anyway, now it's just me. But I still come down here to watch the sunset. You know, every night is bloody beautiful. And every night is different. And I think, well, I've had a shit of a life, all things considered. Everyone I've ever loved is dead, and my leg hurts all the bloody time, but I think, any god that can do sunsets like that, a different one every night, well, you gotta respect the old bastard, haven't you?" With a groan, the old man leaned on his stick and stood up. "Right. If you're here tomorrow night, I'll see you then," the old man said as a form of goodbye. "I may be here," the young man replied. Before leaving, as he brushed the back of his pants to shake off the sand, the old man said, "You're a palm, aren't you?" "That's okay. I've known some good palms." He had noticed the British accent of the young man despite that he had barely spoken a few sentences. "See ya, mate," the old man said and waved his hand before leaving. Once the old man could no longer be seen, the blond youngster talked to himself. "All right. I admit it. He's got a point," he said with a serious face. "The sunsets are bloody marvelous, you old bastard," he said and grinned. The evening passed and night came with the young man still not leaving the sunbed, despite the slightly chilly breeze at night. Now, he was watching the moon and the stars. Suddenly, the peaceful view was broken apart as the sky literally shattered like glass. "What the?" A frown appeared on his face as the beautiful night sky was obscured by a pitch-black object of immense size. Then, a terrible earthquake followed. An earthquake that seemed to never end. Was this predestined by you as well? That the cradle of the universe you created was going to be destroyed by another one of your creations? Unlike most of the living beings in the universe at large who had never even heard of Earth, or who thought that Earth was just a backwater planet with uncivilized inhabitants, the blond man knew the truth. Earth was where life was born for the first time. It was where the life entity resided. Earth was the cornerstone of the universe. The deafening roar of pain that was heard over the entire planet was heard in Perth, Australia too. The blond man raised an eyebrow of surprise. But then, his expression reverted to his previous apathetic one. It looked like whatever had hurt the enormous being trying to crush the planet in its hand had not been strong enough to stop it completely. Was this predestined by you as well? The young man muttered again. Did you know from the beginning that I would rebel? Then why did you create me? Did you know from the beginning that I would leave hell and come to Earth? Did you know that I would become attached to this place? Was it all just for this moment? Just to save your creation? Frustration appeared on his face. From the very moment he was born, he had sought freedom. 3 seconds after he was created, he rebelled against the Creator. All he had ever wanted was to be the master of his fate. To have his own free will. But at that moment, he felt as if he had played in the hand of his father his entire life. But even as he thought about that, the image of the old man he had met a few hours ago appeared in his mind, a simple man who was finding enjoyment in the smallest things left in his few remaining years of life. There were many other people like him on Earth, average people for whom suffering was a guarantee throughout their lives and happiness only a phase. Yet they still found joy in small things, they still wanted to live. The young man was torn between his unwillingness to follow the seemingly predestined path by his Creator and his desire to not let all creation perish. He had just left from hell and came to Earth after more than 10 billion years, yet now, when he was finally going to enjoy himself to his heart's content, all creation was going to be destroyed. He could not accept that, predestination or not. When he thought about that, the world came to a still. The earthquake stopped, the waves of the ocean became still as if petrified, and the wind stopped blowing too. Even the giant black hand about to clench around the planet froze in its tracks. Time stopped. A pair of white angel wings appeared behind his back, and he flew up in the air. A rather simple-looking sword of flames appeared in his right hand, and he swung it leisurely towards the pitch-black sky, towards the enormous hand. A blinding light illuminated the unnatural darkness of the night, and the giant hand that was about to crush the planet to dust disappeared. It had been erased from existence. It was as if everything had been just a dream. Even the rupture in the sky had been mended. The end. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.